The transport shuttle hummed through the void of space, carrying its precious cargo toward the most prestigious institution in the galaxy. Through the reinforced viewport, a massive structure came into view, dwarfing even the largest capital ships. The Galactic Academy floated in the darkness like a metallic city, its countless windows glowing with the light of 1,000 different worlds. Maya Chen pressed her face against the cool glass, her breath fogging the surface as she stared in wonder. After years of preparation, countless examinations and psychological evaluations that had pushed her to her limits, she was finally here. The Academy accepted only the brightest minds from across the galaxy, representing over 300 different species. The selection process was so rigorous that some worlds went decades without a single accepted candidate. The shuttle bay doors opened with a mechanical groan, revealing a vast chamber filled with arriving students. Maya's heart raced as she gathered her single bag of belongings. She had been warned about this moment during her briefings on Earth. The Academy operated on a strict merit-based system where species, homeworld, or political connections meant nothing. Here, only intelligence, adaptability, and determination mattered. As she stepped off the shuttle, Maya found herself surrounded by beings she had only seen in holographic databases. A crystalline entity from the Xerion cluster floated nearby, its translucent body refracting the hangar lights into brilliant rainbows. To her left, a towering Krumnari warrior, easily 3 meters tall and covered in natural armor plating, carefully maneuvered through the crowd on 6 powerful legs. The air itself seemed alive with the chatter of dozens of languages, some musical, others consisting of clicks and whistles that her universal translator struggled to interpret. Despite the overwhelming diversity, Maya noticed something immediately. She was not alone among her kind. Several other bipedal humanoids moved through the crowd, though their specific origins remained unclear. The Academy's registration process deliberately obscured homeworld information during the first year, forcing students to interact based on merit rather than preconceptions about their species' capabilities or reputation. A holographic figure materialized in the center of the hangar, towering above the assembled students. The image showed a dignified being with features that seemed to shift and blend, representing no single species, but somehow embodying characteristics familiar to all present. This was Director Voss, whose true species remained one of the Academy's greatest mysteries. Some claimed Voss was an ancient artificial intelligence. Others believed the Director to be a collective consciousness representing the Academy's founding species. "Welcome, candidates to your new home," the hologram spoke, its voice somehow reaching each student in their own language while maintaining perfect clarity. "You have been selected not for what you are, but for what you might become. The next 7 years will test every assumption you hold about intelligence, cooperation, and the very nature of consciousness itself." Maya felt a chill run down her spine as Director Voss's gaze seemed to find her in the crowd. "Some of you come from worlds that have mastered faster than light travel for millennia. Others represent civilizations that have only recently discovered fire. Yet each of you demonstrated the same spark during our selection process, the capacity to think beyond the limitations of your origin." The orientation continued with practical matters. Student housing assignments, class schedules, and academy regulations flowed past in a blur of information. Maya learned that her dormitory section housed students from 12 different worlds, each requiring specific atmospheric and gravitational accommodations. Her own room would maintain Earth-normal conditions, though she would need to adapt to the Academy's standardized day cycle of 32 hours. As the crowd dispersed, Maya found herself walking alongside a student whose species she couldn't immediately identify. The being stood roughly her height, with smooth gray skin and large dark eyes that seemed to hold depths of ancient wisdom. When they spoke, their voice carried a melodic quality that reminded Maya of wind chimes. "I am Zeth of the Wandering Stars," the being introduced themselves, using the Academy's standard greeting format. "My studies focus on quantum mechanical applications in biological systems." "What draws your curiosity?" Maya paused, realizing this was her first real conversation with an alien intelligence. "I'm Maya. My interests lie in systems theory and emergent complexity, specifically how simple rules can generate sophisticated behaviors across different scales and environments." Zeth's large eyes brightened with what Maya interpreted as interest. "Fascinating. Your approach suggests a perspective that looks beyond surface complexity to underlying patterns. Such thinking is rare among younger species. The comment struck Maya as odd, though she couldn't quite identify why. As they walked through the academy's corridors, she noticed other students glancing in their direction with expressions she couldn't read. Some seemed curious, others appeared almost wary. The reactions puzzled her, as nothing about her conversation with Zeth seemed particularly remarkable. Their journey ended at the residential quarter, where Maya's room assignment waited behind a door marked with symbols she didn't recognize. As she placed her palm on the identification scanner, the door's surface shimmered and became transparent, revealing a space that somehow felt both alien and familiar. The room's walls could apparently shift their configuration based on the occupant's psychological profile, creating an environment optimized for learning and rest. Maya set down her bag and activated the room's information terminal. The Academy's database contained millions of research papers, historical records, and theoretical frameworks developed by thousands of species over countless generations. She spent hours browsing through subjects that didn't exist in Earth's scientific vocabulary, concepts that required entirely new ways of thinking about reality itself. As the Academy's artificial night cycle began, Maya found herself standing at her room's viewport looking out at the stars. Somewhere among those distant lights was Earth, a small blue world whose greatest achievements might seem primitive to her fellow students. Yet she was here selected by the same rigorous process that had chosen the most brilliant minds from across the galaxy. What she didn't know was that her presence at the Academy had already set in motion events that would challenge everything the galactic community believed about intelligence, evolution, and the true potential hidden within seemingly ordinary species. The mystery of her selection would soon become a question that reached the highest levels of galactic government, forcing ancient civilizations to confront uncomfortable truths about their own assumptions and limitations. Maya's first class took place in what the Academy called a flexible learning environment, a chamber that could reshape itself based on the subject being taught. As she entered, the walls displayed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with trade routes, political boundaries, and resource distributions highlighted in different colors. Professor Keth, a being resembling a collection of metallic tendrils arranged in a roughly humanoid shape, gestured for the students to take their positions. Today we examine the fundamental challenge that has shaped galactic civilization for the past 50,000 years, Professor Keth announced, their voice resonating from multiple points around their form. The integration of species with vastly different cognitive architectures into a functional society. Maya settled into her designated learning alcove, noting that the other students represented an impressive variety of evolutionary paths. The student to her right appeared to be some form of hive mind entity, multiple small bodies moving in perfect coordination. Across the room, a gaseous being contained within a specialized environmental suit communicated through controlled emissions of differently colored vapors. Consider the Virex Imperium, Professor Keth continued, highlighting a section of the galactic map. For 12,000 years, they believed that their particular form of distributed consciousness represented the pinnacle of intelligent evolution. They viewed individual-based intelligence as primitive, inefficient, and ultimately doomed to extinction. The holographic display shifted, showing the rise and fall of various civilizations. Maya watched as entire star systems changed hands, their colors shifting to represent different dominant species. The patterns seemed almost organic, like watching the slow growth and death of living organisms. Then they encountered the solitary thinkers of Proxima Vale. Professor Keth's tendrils writhed in what Maya had learned was their species' equivalent of a smile. A civilization of beings who had achieved faster-than-light travel despite each individual working in complete isolation, never communicating with others of their kind except to reproduce. A student near the back of the room, whose crystalline structure had been slowly rotating throughout the lecture, suddenly stopped. How could isolated intelligences possibly coordinate the massive undertakings required for interstellar travel? An excellent question, trainee Xeris, Professor Keth replied. The answer challenged every assumption the Vrex held about the nature of intelligence itself. Each solitary thinker had independently arrived at identical solutions to the same problems. Their separation forced them to develop cognitive processes so efficient and universal that parallel evolution of ideas became inevitable. Maya found herself leaning forward, completely absorbed. The implications were staggering. If intelligence could evolve along such radically different paths while still reaching the same destinations, what did that say about the nature of consciousness itself? This brings us to one of the Academy's core missions, Professor Keth continued. We seek to understand not just how intelligence manifests across different species, but why certain approaches prove more adaptable than others when facing unprecedented challenges. The lecture shifted to focus on a series of galactic crises that had tested various civilizations over the millennia. Maya watched as species after species faced extinction-level challenges, their survival often depending on their ability to think beyond their traditional cognitive patterns. The successful civilizations shared one common trait. They could rapidly restructure their approach to problem-solving when their usual methods proved inadequate. As the class progressed, Maya began to notice something troubling. Several of her fellow students kept glancing in her direction, their expressions unreadable but somehow intent. During a break in the lecture, Zeth approached her learning alcove. "Your questions during the discussion period were particularly insightful," Zeth said, though Maya couldn't recall asking any questions aloud. "Your perspective suggests familiarity with rapid cognitive adaptation under pressure." Maya felt confused. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I was just following the logical implications of Professor Keth's examples." Zeth's large eyes seemed to study her carefully. "Perhaps. Though I notice you consistently identify alternative solutions that others miss. Such pattern recognition typically requires either extensive experience with diverse cognitive frameworks or..." They paused, as if uncertain whether to continue. "Or what?" "Or natural cognitive architecture specifically evolved for rapid adaptation," Zeth finished quietly. "Such traits are extremely rare and historically significant." Before Maya could ask what that meant, Professor Keth called the class back to attention. The remainder of the lecture focused on practical exercises in cross-species communication and problem-solving. Students were paired with others from completely different cognitive backgrounds and asked to develop solutions to hypothetical scenarios. Maya found herself working with the gaseous being, whose name translated roughly to flowing thought amid starlight. Communication required her to interpret patterns in their vapor emissions while expressing her own ideas through a combination of gestures and mathematical symbols displayed on her learning alcove screen. The exercise involved designing a habitat suitable for a newly discovered species whose biology remained largely unknown. Most student pairs approached the problem by creating adaptable environments that could be modified once more information became available. Maya and Flowing Thought took a different approach entirely. "What if we design a system that helps the unknown species design their own habitat?" Maya suggested, her gestures translated into chemical patterns that Flowing Thought could interpret. "Instead of trying to anticipate their needs, we create tools that allow them to express those needs directly." Flowing Thought's vapor cloud shifted to deep blue and gold, indicating excitement. Their response came through controlled emissions that Maya's translator rendered as, "Yes. Bypass our limitations by empowering their capabilities. Elegant solution transcends knowledge barriers." Their presentation drew immediate attention from Professor Keth and several other students. The solution was so fundamentally different from the other approaches that it seemed to represent an entirely different way of thinking about the problem itself. "Trainee Maya and Trainee Flowing Thought," Professor Keth announced, "have demonstrated something remarkable. Rather than attempting to solve the problem within existing frameworks, they have created a new framework that transforms the problem into something solvable by any intelligence, regardless of our ability to understand that intelligence." Maya felt a mixture of pride and growing unease. The attention from her classmates was becoming more pronounced, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her responses were being evaluated for something beyond their academic merit. After class, as students dispersed to their next learning sessions, Maya noticed a small group of faculty members gathered in quiet conversation near the chamber's exit. Their discussion stopped abruptly when they noticed her approaching, and she caught only a fragment of their exchange. Unprecedented. Pattern recognition for a first-year student. Cognitive. Flexibility indices are off the charts. Perhaps we should notify the selection committee. Maya passed by without being acknowledged, but the fragments she had overheard left her with more questions than answers. What was so unusual about her performance? Why did her fellow students seem to be watching her so carefully? And most importantly, What had the selection committee been looking for when they chose her for the academy? As she made her way to her next class, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that her time at the academy was about to become far more complicated than she had ever imagined. 3 weeks into her studies, Maya discovered the academy's most closely guarded secret by accident. She had been working late in the quantum mechanics laboratory, struggling with an assignment that required manipulating probability fields at the subatomic level. The technique was considered advanced coursework, typically reserved for third-year students. But her professor had suggested she attempt it after her unusual performance in theoretical physics. The laboratory fell silent, except for the gentle hum of containment fields and the soft clicking of quantum processors. Maya found herself alone with equipment worth more than the gross domestic product of most planets. As she worked, adjusting field harmonics and monitoring probability cascades, something extraordinary happened. The quantum field began responding to her intentions before she made the physical adjustments to the controls. At first, she attributed this to coincidence or equipment malfunction. But as the phenomenon repeated, Maya realized she was somehow influencing quantum probability through direct mental interaction with the field itself. "That should be impossible," she whispered, staring at the readings on her monitor. According to every known law of physics, consciousness could not directly interact with quantum fields without technological intermediation. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Her thoughts were somehow entangled with the quantum system she was studying. "Indeed it should be," a voice said from behind her. Maya spun around to find Director Voss standing in the laboratory entrance. Not a hologram this time, but the director's actual physical form. Up close, Voss appeared even more mysterious, their features shifting subtly as if existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Director Voss?" Maya stammered, quickly shutting down her equipment. "I was just finishing up my assignment. I didn't realize how late it had gotten." "Please continue your work," Voss said, moving closer to examine Maya's experimental setup. "Your approach to quantum field manipulation is quite remarkable. Tell me, how long have you been able to influence probability fields through direct neural interface?" Maya felt her heart stop. "I don't know what you mean. I was just following the standard procedures outlined in the coursework." Voss studied the quantum field readings with obvious interest. Standard procedures require physical manipulation of field generators and probability cascades. What you accomplished requires a level of consciousness field integration that we have observed in fewer than 12 individuals across the entire recorded history of galactic civilization. The laboratory seemed to grow colder as the implications of Voss's words sank in. Maya realized she had stumbled into something far beyond academic curiosity. "Are you saying that what I did is unusual?" "Unusual?" Voss's features shifted into what might have been amusement. "My dear student, what you accomplished tonight represents one of the rarest cognitive abilities in the known galaxy. The capacity for direct consciousness quantum field interaction has historically appeared only in species that have evolved under extremely specific conditions." Voss gestured to the quantum field generator, which was still displaying residual patterns from Maya's experiments. "This ability typically emerges in civilizations that have faced repeated extinction-level threats over millions of years. The evolutionary pressure required to develop such cognitive flexibility is so extreme that most species either evolve the capability or cease to exist entirely." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you implying about my species?" "I am not implying anything," Voss replied carefully. "I am stating a fact. Humans possess cognitive architecture that suggests an evolutionary history unlike anything in our databases. Your species' rapid technological advancement, extraordinary adaptability, and now this demonstration of quantum consciousness interface capabilities indicate that Earth has experienced challenges that most worlds never encounter." The director moved to a wall display and activated a complex star chart, showing the galactic arm containing Earth's solar system. "Your homeworld lies in what we call the catalyst zone, a region of space where stellar phenomena create conditions of perpetual environmental instability. Most planets in this region are uninhabitable. Those few that do develop life typically produce species with remarkable resilience and cognitive flexibility." Maya stared at the display, trying to process what she was hearing. You're saying that Earth's location made humans evolve differently? I am saying that humans may represent something unprecedented in galactic history, Voss replied. A species that has evolved the cognitive tools necessary to transcend the limitations that constrain other forms of intelligence, while retaining enough individual autonomy to avoid the stagnation that typically accompanies advanced mental capabilities. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of 3 other faculty members, each representing different species Maya had encountered during her studies. Professor Keth was among them, their metallic tendrils writhing with what Maya now recognized as agitation. Director, the council has been asking questions about the human selection, Professor Keth said without preamble. Several member species are expressing concern about our decision to admit a student from an unvetted world. Their concerns are understandable, another faculty member added. This was Professor Mellon, whose crystalline structure seemed to pulse with inner light as they spoke. Humans have no history with the galactic community, no established cognitive profiles, no predictable behavioral patterns. The selection committee's decision to admit one represents a significant deviation from established protocols. Maya felt like an intruder in her own conversation. Excuse me, but I'm standing right here. If there are concerns about my admission to the academy, shouldn't I be part of this discussion? The faculty members exchanged glances that somehow conveyed entire conversations. Director Voss turned back to Maya with what she interpreted as concern. You have become the center of a debate that reaches the highest levels of galactic government, Voss explained. The Academy's charter requires us to seek out intelligence, wherever it emerges. But some council members believe that admitting students from unknown species represents an unacceptable risk. Risk of what? Of disrupting the careful balance that has maintained galactic stability for 50,000 years, Professor Mellon replied. Species are admitted to the galactic community only after extensive evaluation periods that typically last several centuries. Your admission to the academy essentially bypassed that entire process. Maya felt a surge of anger. So I'm some kind of experiment? My selection wasn't based on merit, but on curiosity about my species. Your selection was based entirely on merit, Voss said firmly. Your test scores were among the highest in academy history. Your problem-solving approaches demonstrated cognitive flexibility that impressed evaluators across dozens of species. But your performance here has exceeded even our most optimistic projections. Which brings us to the current problem, Professor Keth added. There are those within the Galactic Council who believe that humans may represent a threat to the established order. Species with rapid cognitive adaptation capabilities have historically proven difficult to integrate into stable governmental structures. The weight of revelation crashed down on Maya like a collapsing star. She wasn't just a student at the academy. She was potentially a representative of an entire species whose future relationship with galactic civilization hung in the balance based on her performance and behavior. What happens if the council decides that humans are too dangerous to integrate? Maya asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. The faculty members' silence spoke volumes. Finally, Director Voss replied with carefully chosen words. The Academy exists to prove that intelligence, regardless of its origin, can contribute to the betterment of galactic civilization. Your success here may determine whether humanity gets the chance to make that contribution, or whether Earth remains permanently isolated from the galactic community. Maya realized that her identity as a student was only the beginning. She had become something far more significant and dangerous, proof that humanity deserved a place among the stars, or evidence that some species were too unpredictable to trust with the power that came with galactic citizenship. Maya's daily routine at the academy transformed overnight. Where once she had been just another student navigating challenging coursework, she now found herself under constant observation. Faculty members attended her classes as silent observers. Her test results were analyzed by committees she never saw. Even her casual conversations with fellow students seemed to carry weight beyond their apparent significance. The change became most apparent during advanced strategic planning, a course designed to teach students how different species approached large-scale problem-solving. The class was presented with a complex scenario. A star system containing 12 inhabited worlds faced imminent destruction due to stellar instability. Each species had different capabilities, resource limitations, and cultural priorities. The challenge was to develop an evacuation and relocation plan that could preserve not just the populations but the unique characteristics that made each civilization valuable. Most student groups approached the problem methodically, identifying resource requirements, calculating transport capacity, and prioritizing evacuations based on population size and strategic importance. Their solutions were competent, but followed predictable patterns that reflected their species' typical decision-making processes. Maya found herself grouped with students she had never worked with before. Xeris, the crystalline entity who communicated through harmonic resonance. Thruk, a massive silicon-based being whose thoughts moved with geological patience. And Nyx, a collective intelligence that manifested as a swarm of interconnected metallic spheres. The conventional approaches will save perhaps 60% of the total population, Xeris observed, their crystalline form casting rainbow patterns across their workspace. Acceptable losses by most galactic standards, but hardly optimal. Thruk's response came slowly, each word carefully considered. Optimization requires understanding what we are truly trying to preserve. Are we saving lives, cultures, knowledge, or something else entirely? Nyx's spheres arranged themselves into geometric patterns as the collective processed information. All objectives are equally valid. The challenge lies in finding solutions that serve multiple goals simultaneously, rather than forcing us to choose between them. Maya studied the scenario parameters, but her mind was working on a different level entirely. Instead of trying to solve the evacuation problem directly, she found herself questioning the assumptions built into the scenario itself. What if we're approaching this backward? She said suddenly. Instead of trying to move 12 civilizations away from a dying star, what if we could stabilize the star itself? Her teammates stared at her with what she interpreted as confusion. Xeris's harmonic emissions shifted to frequencies Maya had learned indicated skepticism. Stellar engineering on that scale has never been successfully attempted, Xeris pointed out. The energy requirements alone would exceed the combined output of most galactic civilizations. Besides, Thruk added with characteristic deliberation, the scenario specifically states that stellar collapse is inevitable. We are meant to work within that constraint. Maya nodded, understanding their objections, but the idea had triggered something in her thinking that she couldn't ignore. But what if the constraint itself is wrong? What if the assumption of inevitability is actually the problem we need to solve? She pulled up the stellar data included in the scenario and began manipulating the display, looking for patterns that others might have missed. As she worked, she found herself slipping into the same mental state that had allowed her to interact with quantum fields. Her consciousness seemed to expand, allowing her to perceive relationships between variables that should have been invisible. "Look at this," she said, highlighting a series of gravitational anomalies around the unstable star. "These readings suggest that the stellar instability isn't natural. Something is artificially destabilizing the star's core fusion processes." Nyx's spheres suddenly snapped into a tight formation, indicating intense collective focus. "You are suggesting that the crisis is deliberately manufactured?" "I'm suggesting that if we can identify the source of the artificial destabilization, we might be able to reverse it," Maya replied, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface as she traced energy patterns through the stellar data. "And if we can stabilize the star, we don't need to evacuate anyone." The implications hit her teammates simultaneously. Rather than managing a disaster, they would be preventing it entirely. Instead of preserving fragments of 12 civilizations, they would be saving them intact, working with unprecedented intensity. The group began developing a solution that required them to think beyond the constraints of the original scenario. Maya found herself naturally coordinating their efforts, somehow able to translate concepts between their vastly different cognitive frameworks and integrate their diverse capabilities into a unified approach. Xeris used their harmonic processing abilities to identify the precise frequencies needed to counteract the artificial destabilization. Thruk's geological patience allowed them to model the long-term consequences of stellar intervention across thousands of years. Nyx's collective intelligence coordinated the massive logistical requirements for implementing their solution. As their presentation came together, Maya realized that something extraordinary was happening. She wasn't just working with her teammates. She was somehow facilitating a level of cross-species cooperation that exceeded anything she had seen in her other classes. Ideas flowed between them with an efficiency that seemed to transcend normal communication barriers. When they presented their solution to the class, the response was immediate and dramatic. Professor Keth's tendrils writhed with what Maya had learned was extreme agitation. Other faculty members who had been observing the class moved to the front of the room. Their attention focused entirely on Maya's group. "Your solution is theoretically sound," Professor Keth acknowledged, "but it requires a level of coordinated effort between multiple species that has never been successfully achieved in galactic history." "More importantly," added another faculty member, Maya didn't recognize, "your approach demonstrates cognitive capabilities that suggest familiarity with coordination frameworks unknown to current galactic civilization." Maya felt that familiar chill of realization. Once again, her performance had exceeded expectations in ways that seemed to reveal more about humanity than about her individual capabilities. After class, Director Voss approached her with an expression that mixed concern and fascination. "Your solution to today's scenario will be reviewed by the Galactic Council's Strategic Planning Committee," Voss informed her. "They are particularly interested in your coordination methodology and its potential applications to real galactic challenges." "I just tried to think outside the constraints of the problem," Maya replied, though even as she said it, she realized that explanation was inadequate. "Yes," Voss agreed, "and your ability to do that consistently, while simultaneously enabling others to transcend their own cognitive limitations, is precisely what has captured the Council's attention." Maya felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. "What do they want from me?" "They want to understand whether humanity represents an evolutionary breakthrough in cooperative intelligence," Voss replied. "And depending on that answer, they will decide whether Earth should be welcomed into galactic civilization or permanently quarantined to prevent disruption of the established order." The stakes were becoming clearer with each passing day. Maya wasn't just proving her own worth as a student. She was demonstrating the potential value or danger of her entire species. Every success raised the possibility of humanity joining the galactic community, but it also increased the fear among some council members that humans might destabilize the careful balance that had maintained peace for millennia. As she walked back to her dormitory, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that her next few weeks at the academy would determine the fate of every human who would ever live. The summons came during Maya's sleep cycle, delivered by a holographic messenger that materialized directly in her dormitory room. The figure bore the insignia of the Galactic Council, its formal robes shifting through colors that represented the authority of dozens of member species. "Student Maya Chen of Earth," the messenger intoned, "you are commanded to appear before the emergency session of the Galactic Council in 72 standard hours. Your testimony will address the matter of human integration into galactic civilization." Maya sat up in her bed, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. "Emergency session? What's happened?" "The Council has received reports of concerning developments in human space," the messenger replied with mechanical precision. "Your homeworld has achieved faster-than-light capability 6 months ahead of all projections. Additionally, human ships have been detected approaching the boundaries of 3 separate galactic territories." The hologram flickered and continued. "The Council requires your assessment of human intentions and capabilities to determine appropriate response protocols." Maya felt her world tilting on its axis. Humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel? The last she knew, Earth's most ambitious space program barely extended beyond the outer planets of the solar system. How could human technology have advanced so rapidly? "There must be some mistake," she said. "When I left Earth, we didn't have the theoretical framework for faster-than-light travel, let alone the technology." "The evidence is irrefutable," the messenger stated. "Human vessels bearing Earth insignia have been observed utilizing translation drive technology. The speed of this technological development has raised significant concerns about the nature of human intelligence and its potential impact on galactic stability." After the messenger disappeared, Maya found herself staring at the ceiling of her room, trying to make sense of what she had learned. How could humanity have made such enormous technological leaps in the few months since her departure? The only logical explanation was that Earth had received external assistance, but from whom? A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry to her room. Maya opened the door to find Zeth standing in the corridor, their large eyes reflecting concern. "I heard about the council summons," Zeth said quietly. "Emergency sessions are extremely rare. In the past 1,000 years, only 3 have been called, and each resulted in significant changes to galactic policy." "What kind of changes?" Maya asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "The last emergency session resulted in the quarantine of the Corvin system after their aggressive expansion threatened 3 neighboring civilizations," Zeth replied. "The session before that led to the establishment of the non-interference protocols that prevent advanced species from sharing technology with developing worlds." Maya felt a chill of understanding. "You think the Council is considering quarantining Earth?" "I think the Council is trying to understand why humanity appears to be developing capabilities that should be impossible given your technological baseline," Zeth said carefully. "Your performance here at the Academy, combined with these reports of rapid technological advancement, suggests patterns that make some Council members very nervous." Before Maya could respond, Director Voss appeared in the corridor behind Zeth. The director's presence seemed to fill the space with an almost tangible sense of urgency. "Trainee Maya, I need you to come with me immediately," Voss said. "The Council has provided additional information that changes the nature of your upcoming testimony." They traveled through sections of the Academy that Maya had never seen before, past laboratories containing equipment she couldn't begin to identify, and through corridors that seemed to bend space itself. Finally, they arrived at a chamber that resembled a war room more than an academic facility. The walls displayed real-time galactic intelligence feeds, showing the positions of ships, political boundaries, and resource flows across dozens of star systems. At the center of it all was a holographic representation of Earth's solar system, with several markers indicating the presence of vessels moving at speeds that shouldn't have been possible. "As of 6 hours ago," Director Voss began, "human ships have been detected in 4 different star systems simultaneously. Each vessel appears to be utilizing technology that exceeds the capabilities of species that have been part of galactic civilization for centuries." Maya stared at the display in disbelief. "That's impossible. Earth doesn't have that kind of technology." "No," Voss agreed, "Earth doesn't. Which raises the question of where humanity acquired these capabilities, and more importantly, what they intend to do with them." The director manipulated the display, zooming in on one of the detected vessels. The ship's design was clearly human, but it incorporated elements that seemed to blend technologies from multiple galactic civilizations. This vessel was intercepted, attempting to establish contact with the Zirion cluster, Voss continued. Its crew consisted of humans who claimed to be conducting peaceful exploration, but their ship's capabilities suggest preparations for something far more significant than exploration. Maya felt pieces of a puzzle beginning to fall into place, though the complete picture remained frustratingly unclear. "You think someone has been helping humanity develop these technologies?" "We know someone has been helping humanity," Voss replied grimly. "The question is who and why they chose to violate the non-interference protocols in such a dramatic fashion." The director activated another display, showing a timeline of technological developments across known space. Human advancement was represented by a line that remained relatively flat for millennia, then suddenly spiked upward at an impossible angle. "This pattern is unprecedented," Voss explained. "No species in galactic history has made such rapid technological leaps without external assistance. But the level of assistance required to achieve these results would necessitate involvement from one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy." Maya studied the timeline, trying to understand the implications. "Are you saying that humanity might be part of some larger plan?" "I am saying that humanity's sudden emergence as a technological power has created a crisis that threatens the fundamental assumptions underlying galactic governance," Voss replied. "The Council needs to understand whether humans are acting independently or as proxies for another power." The weight of her situation finally hit Maya with full force. She wasn't just representing humanity's potential for integration into galactic civilization. She was potentially testifying about her species' role in what might be the greatest political crisis in galactic history. "What am I supposed to tell the Council?" she asked. "I don't know anything about these technological developments or who might be helping humanity." "You will tell them the truth," Voss said. "But more importantly, you will demonstrate through your testimony whether humans possess the cognitive capabilities necessary to handle the responsibilities that come with advanced technology." Director Voss moved closer, their expression grave. "The Council has 3 options regarding humanity. They can welcome Earth into galactic civilization as a full member species. They can establish a limited contact protocol that allows gradual integration over several centuries. Or they can implement a permanent quarantine that prevents any further human expansion beyond your solar system." Maya realized that the next 72 hours would not just determine her own future, but potentially the destiny of every human being who would ever live. The testimony she gave to the Galactic Council would decide whether humanity joined the community of stars or remained forever isolated on a single world. As she prepared to leave the Academy for what might be the most important conversation in human history, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that there were still pieces missing from the puzzle. Someone had helped humanity achieve impossible technological advancement, but their identity and motivations remained hidden. And until those questions were answered, both she and her species would remain at the mercy of forces they didn't understand. The Galactic Council chamber was a marvel of engineering that existed partially outside normal space-time, allowing representatives from hundreds of species to attend, despite incompatible environmental requirements. Maya found herself standing in what appeared to be a vast amphitheater. Though she knew that beings around her were experiencing the same space through completely different sensory modalities, Council Speaker Vex, an ancient being whose species had helped establish galactic civilization 50,000 years earlier, materialized on a platform that seemed to float in the center of the chamber. Their form was difficult to focus on directly, as if existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "We convened this emergency session to address the unprecedented situation developing in Sector 7441, specifically regarding the species designated as human from the world called Earth," Speaker Vex announced, their voice somehow reaching every attendee in their native language. "Student Maya Chen has been called to provide testimony regarding her species' capabilities and intentions." Maya stepped forward onto a smaller platform that rose from the chamber floor. As she did, she became aware of the immense attention focused on her. Hundreds of the galaxy's most powerful beings were studying her every movement, analyzing her responses for clues about humanity's true nature. "Student Chen," Speaker Vex began, "the Council has observed concerning developments in human space. Your species has achieved technological capabilities that should require centuries to develop, and human vessels have been detected approaching multiple galactic territories." "Explain these developments." Maya took a deep breath, knowing that her next words could determine the fate of every human alive. "Honored Council members, I can only speak to what I observed before leaving Earth. At that time, humanity had not achieved faster-than-light travel. We had barely begun exploring our own solar system. I have no knowledge of how these technological advances were achieved. A being that resembled a crystalline mountain shifted its form, creating harmonic resonances that Maya's translator rendered as speech. Yet your performance at the Academy demonstrates cognitive capabilities that suggest familiarity with advanced technological concepts. How do you explain this contradiction?" "I can only explain my own abilities and experiences," Maya replied. "I've always been able to see patterns and connections that others might miss. At the Academy, I've learned that this apparently allows me to work with quantum fields and coordinate between different types of intelligence, but I had no knowledge that these abilities were unusual until I arrived here." Speaker Vex manipulated a holographic display that showed the detected human vessels. "These ships incorporate technology from multiple galactic civilizations. Such integration requires deep understanding of principles that should be unknown to your species. Who provided this knowledge?" "I honestly don't know," Maya said. "But I may have an idea about how to find out." The chamber fell silent. Even the constant background hum of translation systems seemed to pause. "Explain," Speaker Vex commanded. Maya felt the same mental state beginning that had allowed her to interact with quantum fields, but this time it seemed to extend far beyond the laboratory. Her consciousness expanded, allowing her to perceive patterns and connections that spanned the entire chamber. "The technology in those ships," she said, her voice carrying a confidence that surprised her, "isn't just borrowed from multiple civilizations. It's been integrated in a way that creates something entirely new. That kind of integration requires understanding the underlying principles that connect all these different technological approaches." She gestured to the holographic display, and to her amazement, it responded to her intentions just as the quantum fields had. The image zoomed in on specific components of the human vessels, highlighting design elements that came from different species. "Look at how these systems are connected," Maya continued, her mind working on levels she didn't fully understand. "The Krumnari power coupling is integrated with Xerion data processing through a Vrex computational matrix. But the integration points use principles that none of these species developed individually." A ripple of surprise moved through the council chamber. Maya was demonstrating capabilities that even many council members didn't possess, manipulating complex holographic systems through direct mental interface. "You're suggesting that humans independently developed integration principles that allow them to unify technologies from multiple species?" Speaker Vex asked. "I'm suggesting that humans may have evolved cognitive architecture that naturally thinks in terms of integration and synthesis," Maya replied. "We don't just borrow ideas. We instinctively look for ways to combine them into something greater than the sum of their parts." Director Voss appeared on a nearby platform, their form more solid and defined than Maya had ever seen before. "Honored council members, I believe Student Chen has identified something crucial. Human cognitive architecture may represent a natural evolution toward what we call synthesis intelligence." The term sent another ripple through the assembly. Maya had never heard it before, but somehow she understood its significance. "For 50,000 years," Director Voss continued, "galactic civilization has been built on the principle of specialized intelligence. Each species develops unique capabilities and contributes those capabilities to the whole. But humans appear to possess the ability to not just use these different capabilities, but to synthesize them into entirely new approaches." Speaker Vex's attention focused on Maya with laser intensity. "Demonstrate this synthesis capability." Maya felt a moment of panic. She was being asked to prove humanity's worth to the entire galactic community, but she wasn't sure she understood her own abilities well enough to control them reliably. Then she remembered her first quantum field experiment, and the feeling of her consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of her individual mind. She allowed that same expansion to occur now, but instead of connecting with quantum fields, she reached out to the minds around her. The effect was immediate and dramatic. For a brief moment, every being in the council chamber experienced direct mental contact with Maya's consciousness. But more than that, they experienced each other through her awareness, feeling the unique perspectives and cognitive approaches of dozens of different species all at once. The connection lasted only seconds before Maya's inexperience forced her to break it. But the impact was profound. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of surprised exclamations in hundreds of languages. "Impossible," someone declared. "No single consciousness can facilitate multi-species mental contact without technological assistance." "Yet we all experienced it," another voice replied. "She created a temporary collective consciousness that maintained the individuality of each participant while allowing direct sharing of perspectives." Speaker Vex's form solidified into something more recognizably humanoid as they focused entirely on Maya. "Student Chen, you have just demonstrated a capability that represents a fundamental evolution in the nature of consciousness itself. The question now is whether humanity as a species possesses this potential, or whether you are a unique individual." Maya felt the weight of the entire galaxy's attention pressing down on her. The answer she gave would determine not just humanity's future, but potentially the direction of galactic civilization itself. "I don't know if all humans can do what I just did," she admitted, "but I believe every human has the potential to think in terms of synthesis and integration. It's how we've always approached problems even when we didn't understand we were doing it. We instinctively look for ways to combine different ideas and create something new." The implications of her words settled over the council chamber like a wave of possibility and concern. If humanity truly represented a new form of intelligence capable of synthesizing the capabilities of other species, they could either become the greatest asset galactic civilization had ever gained, or the greatest threat it had ever faced. The Galactic Council's deliberation lasted 18 hours, during which Maya remained in a holding chamber adjacent to the main assembly hall. Through the transparent walls, she could see representatives from hundreds of species engaged in intense debate, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of lights, sounds, and energy patterns that her translator couldn't begin to interpret. Director Voss visited her during the 7th hour, their expression carrying a weight Maya had never seen before. "The council is divided," Voss informed her. "Your demonstration has forced them to confront questions about the nature of intelligence that they thought were settled millennia ago." Maya sat in the chamber's single chair, designed to accommodate dozens of different body types but comfortable for none. "What kind of questions?" "Whether evolution can produce intelligence that transcends the limitations of individual species," Voss replied. "For 50,000 years, galactic civilization has operated on the assumption that each species contributes unique capabilities, but that no single species could synthesize those capabilities into something greater. Your abilities suggest that assumption may be wrong." Through the transparent wall, Maya watched as a group of crystalline beings arranged themselves into geometric patterns that pulsed with mathematical precision. Their debate seemed to involve pure mathematical concepts that existed beyond language. "Some council members see humans as the next step in the evolution of consciousness," Voss continued. "Others view your synthesis capabilities as a threat to the specialized roles that maintain galactic stability. If any species can integrate and improve upon the capabilities of others, what happens to the careful balance between different civilizations?" Maya felt the crushing weight of responsibility. Her individual choices and abilities had somehow become a referendum on humanity's place in the universe. "What are the options they're considering?" "3 primary proposals are under debate," Voss explained. "The integration faction wants to immediately welcome humanity as full members and begin sharing advanced technologies to accelerate your development. They believe synthesis intelligence represents the future of galactic civilization." Director Voss moved closer to the transparent wall, watching the ongoing debates. "The isolation faction wants to establish a permanent quarantine around Earth. They argue that synthesis intelligence could destabilize the specialized relationships that have maintained peace for millennia. They see humans as an existential threat to galactic order." Maya felt her heart sink. "And the third option?" "The observation faction proposes a controlled integration protocol," Voss said. "They want to allow limited human expansion and contact while carefully monitoring your species' development. It's a compromise position that satisfies no one completely, but might be acceptable to a majority." As if summoned by their conversation, Speaker Vex appeared outside the holding chamber. The ancient being's form had taken on aspects that seemed designed to communicate directly with Maya's human sensory system. "Student Chen," Speaker Vex said, "the Council requires additional information before reaching a decision. We need to understand the source of humanity's rapid technological advancement and whether it represents natural development or external interference." Maya felt a familiar expansion of consciousness beginning, the same feeling that had allowed her to demonstrate synthesis intelligence to the entire Council. But this time, instead of reaching out to other minds, she found herself connecting with information patterns that seemed to exist in the space around her. "I think I can find out," she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. The holding chamber's walls became transparent, allowing her to see the entire Council assembly. Every representative turned their attention to her as she stepped forward and placed her hands on what appeared to be an empty section of wall. Maya's consciousness expanded beyond anything she had experienced before. She felt her awareness touching information networks that spanned the galaxy, accessing databases and communication channels that connected thousands of worlds. The sensation was overwhelming, but somehow she maintained focus on the specific question: who had helped humanity achieve impossible technological advancement? The answer came not as words or images, but as a pattern of connection and understanding that flowed directly into her consciousness. She saw the truth with perfect clarity, though she wasn't sure how to explain it to others. "There was no external interference," she announced, her voice carrying across the council chamber with unexpected authority. "Humanity developed these technologies independently, but not through normal research and development." A wave of confusion rippled through the assembly. If humans hadn't received help, and couldn't have developed the technology through normal means. How had they achieved such rapid advancement? Humans on Earth have been unconsciously using synthesis intelligence for months, Maya continued. Her awareness still expanded across galactic information networks. When I left Earth, our scientists and engineers began experiencing what they described as breakthrough insights and intuitive leaps. They thought they were just being creative, but they were actually synthesizing technological principles from sources they didn't recognize. Speaker Vex's form solidified with sharp attention. Explain the source of these technological principles. Maya felt the answer flowing through her expanded consciousness. Electromagnetic radiation carries information patterns from every technological civilization in the galaxy. Most species can't perceive these patterns because they lack the cognitive architecture for synthesis, but humans unconsciously process and integrate this information, transforming it into technological insights that seem to come from nowhere. The implication hit the council chamber like a shockwave. Humanity had essentially been unconsciously reverse engineering technologies from across the galaxy by processing ambient, electromagnetic radiation that other species couldn't interpret. This means that human technological development will continue to accelerate exponentially, Maya realized. The knowledge flowing through her expanded awareness. Every human scientist and engineer is unconsciously accessing the accumulated technological knowledge of galactic civilization. Within a few years, Earth will possess capabilities that rival the most advanced species in the galaxy. The chamber erupted into chaos as representatives began urgent consultations in dozens of languages. Maya felt her expanded consciousness beginning to contract, the effort of maintaining such broad awareness becoming too much to sustain. As her perception returned to normal human levels, she realized that her demonstration had fundamentally changed the nature of the debate. The question was no longer whether to integrate humanity into galactic civilization, but how to manage the integration of a species that would inevitably become one of the most technologically advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Speaker Vex raised their appendages in a gesture that commanded silence throughout the chamber. The Council has reached a decision, they announced. Humanity will be welcomed as full members of galactic civilization, with immediate access to educational and cultural exchange programs. However, this integration comes with unprecedented responsibilities. Maya felt relief wash over her, followed immediately by apprehension about what those responsibilities might entail. Humans will serve as synthesis coordinators, Speaker Vex continued, facilitating cooperation and integration between species that have historically been unable to work together effectively. Your species' unique cognitive architecture makes you natural mediators and integrators for the diverse intelligences that comprise galactic civilization. The decision meant that humanity wouldn't just join galactic civilization, they would play a central role in its continued evolution. Maya realized that her time at the Academy had been preparation for a future in which humans would help bridge the gaps between different forms of intelligence across the galaxy. As the council session concluded and representatives began departing for their homeworlds, Director Voss approached Maya with what she had learned to interpret as satisfaction. Your species has just been handed one of the most important roles in galactic history, Voss said. Synthesis coordinators haven't existed since the early days of galactic civilization, when the first alliances were formed between radically different species. Humans will essentially become the facilitators of galactic cooperation. Maya looked out at the departing council members, each representing civilizations with thousands of years of history and achievement. Soon she would be working with them as an equal, helping to forge connections and solve problems that spanned multiple worlds and species. I hope we're ready for this responsibility, she said. I believe your species has been preparing for this role for your entire evolutionary history, Voss replied. Every challenge humanity has faced on Earth has shaped your cognitive architecture for exactly this purpose. You didn't just pass the test, Maya. You revealed that humans were always meant to be here. As Maya prepared to return to Earth with news that would transform her species' understanding of their place in the universe, she realized that her identity had evolved far beyond anything she could have imagined. She was no longer just a student whose background remained you.